Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to episode 2 of Data Matters. I'm Vicky Gilwar from Privacy Culture, and as usual, I'm joined today by my business partner, Steve Wright. Hi, Steve.
Hello, Vicky. Hello.
So we're looking today at effective privacy programs and their importance to embedding a privacy culture into your organisation. And we're delighted to be joined by Oana Ducuță from Verifone. Hi, Oana.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for inviting.
Thank you. And we have Maria Flores from RELX as well. Hi, Maria.
Hello, thank you very much for the invitation.
So thank you too. So the first thing to note really about this topic is that most privacy experts aren't necessarily project managers or have experience in making change happen in an organisation. The principles of privacy, of course, are enshrined in law, and it's hardly surprising that around, and according to the IAPP, 50% of data protection officers are a lawyer or they hold a law-based degree. Of course, this is fantastic in terms of their knowledge, particularly around their expertise and interpretation of policy and law, but it's widely recognised that to design, build and manage a data privacy change programme, it often requires a different set of skills. So I think I want to start and ask Maria, if that's okay. Can you help us and our audience understand what are the constituent parts of what good looks like in an effective privacy programme?
Thank you, Vicky. What I think is very good for an effective privacy programme is first know the organisation, because we are going to be working with an organisation and we have to know it inside out. So is the structure, is the policies that we currently have, where is going to be the privacy function set, and afterwards having a roadmap. And this roadmap could be any kind of framework. It could be even the one from Privacy Culture, doing publicity here. It could be an accountability framework. There is a beta version now from the ICO. There is one from the CIPL, and there is a fantastic and simple one from the Isle of Man, but it could be also an ISO, like 27701, anything that is going to be giving us some route in which way we want to go. And afterwards, we need to align it. We need to align what is the organization is doing with where we want to go in terms of privacy. We need to have a story that is going to be underlined where we want to reach. And we have to have metrics that is going to be helping us how well we are doing. And of course, having always the goal in mind that we are looking for a privacy culture, a culture of trust.
Fantastic start, Maria. Thank you for that. Excellent. Know your organisation, find a roadmap, have a framework structure, and demonstrate your journey. I love that. Oana, did you have anything you wanted to build onto that?
Yeah, sure. An effective privacy program for me was starting with the lessons learned back when we created the work stream for GDPR implementation. And meaning, for example, that it was a privacy network in each department. So for now, business as usual GDPR compliance, I was maintaining this partnership with business units. Nevertheless, by the end, the metrics that also Maria mentioned might also include things like less time spent with incidents, or less time spent with responding to data subjects requests, and some other examples that sort of I declare myself confident when I'm seeing it. For example, when I'm part of a project review with for a new product, I usually tend to be very happy when I'm not hearing that standard question, is there anything to implement here from a GDPR compliance? But more of when they are coming with solutions like we will implement a data deletion script and every 6 months we'll delete the data. Is it right? And when it comes to incidents, for example, There is also great to have a data breach response plan that is tested at least annually to see how the company will respond in case of a potential incident.
That's great, Maria. Thanks for that. You segued really nicely into the pickup point there, which in terms of how we effectively measure this. And of course, quite rightly, data breaches and how to measure those and looking back at lessons learned from before are going to be at the forefront there. You also mentioned, Maria, metrics. So were there any metrics and measurement that you wanted to add to that? And I'm also thinking in particular around governance as well. So looking at it from a governance perspective and then how you demonstrate the effective measurement of the program in its entirety.
Yes, there are a number of metrics also depending on the audience within the organization. So normally there are three types of metrics. Ones that they are just the activity in itself, others that they are about trends, and others they are about outcomes. Building on what Oana has said, because she was talking about data breaches, is quite interesting to know about data subject requests and what type, when did we have them, where we within SLA, which ones are closed, how many complaints, and also in terms of governance, if we are including training, how many training we have delivered, how many passes, not passes. So it's all to build an image of how we are doing, and trends. They are quite good to know how we are doing over time, where we are going, and what would we need to prioritize.
Fantastic, excellent. And Steve, I know that you've been looking at this really closely of late. Is there anything that you wanted to add on to that in terms of?
Yeah, thanks. I mean, two fantastic answers from our guests there, and I think the subject of KPIs is possibly a show in its own right, because we actually have got a thought piece on this. So I don't want to let the cat out the bag. We've identified over 100 different KPIs as on the back of our framework. Most of those frameworks which Maria mentioned, and the only one that I would also mention was the NIST framework that has just recently been updated. These are all fantastic frameworks and can help you start to think about and shape what kind of KPIs and measurements are going to be needed. And the two areas where I think are well worth measuring. One is around the ROPA, and it kind of touches on the lawful basis, and how accurate your ROPAs are, and they describe the purpose and the lawful basis. And just on a side note, I noticed in this month, October, it was a small fine, but it's a lot of the fines that are coming through from our colleagues over the water are more around this lawful basis point, so that's good for that. But there was something which really struck me. There was the first time I've seen a failure under Article 31. That's the failure to cooperate with the supervisory authority. So in Romania, the organisation obviously got slapped risks for not doing something, and then subsequently under Article 31 they got fined. But sorry, I've distracted myself there a little bit, but I thought it was quite an interesting case because it's the first one I've seen. But also I think there are other areas like data subject rights, and the number of requests and how quickly you're responding to those requests are great KPIs to start to understand that. And also things like the amount of inquiries from, just depending on how transparent you're being with what you're doing with the data, if those inquiries are going up or down, there's another good kind of KPI and a measurement there. But it's a big area.
Certainly is. Thanks, Steve, for that build. So you did start actually to touch on supervisory roles. So I think it'd be good to actually unpack the role piece a bit now. So given the provision of the DPO as specified by GDPR articles 37 to 39, What profile or type of individual do you think is actually sort of required to design this program? Oana, I'll start with you on that, if I may.
Yes, thank you. I also like numbers, Steve. So I would start by mentioning that on the French Data Protection Authority website, I've seen that they have listed 17 DPO skills required for a DPO to get certified. Basically, those are, in general, a DPO should have expertise on laws, data protection practices, also good knowledge of the industry where the organization is having the activity, but also systems and security practices. But I might say that this is not enough. Because the DPO is not sitting back on behind the wall, and you must quote GDPR articles and recitals because nobody will understand internally except the legal team. So from your leadership position, you have to actually provide the direction and to empower business units to make decisions and do what's right in terms of privacy compliance. Nevertheless, you need to have very good skills of listening everybody and communication, especially with all the departments, but maybe with the information security mostly, or the project management team, because you must be there with them in order to provide any insights over GDPR compliance. And obviously you have to monitor the whole privacy program implementation, and sort of you are required to be a good auditor as well, but oriented toward the business and also the human rights. And maybe least but not last, what worked for me as well was to find a good mentor and then become one myself.
Brilliant.
Excellent. Some fantastic points there, Oana. A really sort of wide-ranging set of skill requirements. Maria, was there anything that you wanted to add on to that?
Oana has said many of them. I would get it from another perspective, in the sense that not all organizations need to appoint a DPO, and in the sense that sometimes a DPO doesn't have all these skills, and he can have it within the team, or can have very, very, very good relationships within the organization. So the important thing is that everything that needs to be done within the privacy program is done, and it has to work with the structure of the organization.
Great points as well there, Maria. Thank you for that. And just sort of coming back to a point that Steve started to pick up on earlier on, given that this role, the DPO, will liaise with the supervisory authority as and when required, should it be a different person that is part of this role? Does it require a different set of skills or independence? Steve, did you want to start on that one? Point?
Yeah, of course. It's actually a really good point, because I'm just going to say something here which is not controversial, but in my experience, there's a difference between, and both Oana and Maria just made excellent points in terms of the types of skills, but there's a difference between, I think, being a CPO and a DPO. And I think that the nub of it from my experience is that, you know, the DPO is really responsible for all of those things, so bringing it together, as Oana said, you know, and it could be a team of people that do that. And the difference with the CPO is they are really much more operating at the strategic level. And so they're playing the role of advocacy, and they're playing the role of stakeholder engagement, internally and externally. And I think, and obviously liaison with the regulator. And I think that's, to me, the difference between the two. And I think what Maria was saying about not every organisation needs one is quite true, actually. Not every organisation needs to. Certainly don't need a CPO. I would argue that they need some level of DPO, whether, just to make sure, because most people employ people, but, you can outsource that. I think the key for me is just the nuances about sort of leadership and providing the strategic direction and the vision, because like when I was CPO at Unilever, I described my role as a bit of an ambassador, where I was going around the world getting people to come on board with our set of privacy principles and our internal privacy controls. And that takes a certain type of skill set. You've got to be confident to be able to have a conversation with the chief exec of Latin America, and vice versa, because you've got to convince he or her to ultimately change the culture within your organization or start behaving differently. And where that really hits the rubber, I would say, is where there's jurisdictions where there are no requirements for, say, data rights or and there are obviously still a number of them out there. And so if you're operating in that market, in that part of the world where there is no requirements and you're just following policy or best practice, if you like, then that is where you need the skills which are much more around sort of communication, leadership. You've got to have character, and you've got to be fairly confident in your knowledge, as well as your ability, your soft skills to deal with these people.
Some really, really great points there, Steve, about just that global perspective and adopting privacy principles that you can push through the entirety of the organisation. And just coming back to Maria again on that one. How should this role be, and I think Steve is saying that it should, contributing to the board agenda, strategic approach for the organisation, and how potentially they can add value to get more value essentially from the data through the adoption of good privacy practice.
Data protection is about balancing rights and balancing what an organization is doing with data, with respecting the personal data of users and employees. So there has been an increasing awareness from customers, from users, not just from GDPR, with all the different data breaches and all the different documentaries that we've been seeing on what can happen when data goes wrong. So there is this push for organizations to be more respectful with personal data, because it's a competitive advantage. So from that point of view, it definitely it brings value to the board, because it can tell how balancing, because in this case it's always balancing, and sometimes I've seen that this hasn't been taken right. It's not that they cannot do things, it's that it has to be balanced, and it's to find this balance, knowing how far we're going to be with taking the risk on a new product or a new service, and letting everybody know within the organization which is the benefit of having this culture of privacy.
Fantastic, Maria. Great point there about balancing, as you say, risk and ethical practices. And Oana, did you have anything to build on that?
From my experience, what I've seen is that when you as an organization are dealing with business-to-business customers, and definitely process personal data of those end users, customers, it's always good to have best privacy practices within your organization, because obviously it will be a business competitive advantage. They will choose to work with you, and definitely, nevertheless, you will. It will be very easy to gain their trust and to build on your product, which is already privacy compliant, or it has embedded privacy by default and by design into all the processes, and it also helps a lot to actually have good conversations over the privacy practices with those customers.
Excellent, thank you so much, Oana. And yeah, I think you started to raise a good point there as well about business to business, and making sure, you know, the people that want to work with you, and in fact suppliers that you're working with, are adopting similar practices. I did actually notice that there were a couple of questions that have come in, but Steve, did you want to make a point before I move on?
No, I think Oana touched on a really good point, and I think that's about something that we did at John Lewis. I was pleased to be involved with, was going out to our customers and running customer surveys to find out what they felt and what they were thinking about privacy and what good looks like. And I think this is something which, as data protection officers, we can forget. You know, we're actually still servicing a customer. Now, that customer might be individuals, and you know, we've got to balance that, as Maria quite rightly said, it is a question of risk all the time. But actually, we really need to be listening to the concerns of our customers. You know, the whole transparency principle is there to try and be open and honest with what we're doing with the data, presuming we're doing good things with the data, of course. So I think, just to build on what Oana was saying, is very much go out to your customers, and sometimes those customers can be internal customers. Ask them what they think. How is the privacy program going? Is it effective? Do you feel, as Maria said, that there is a culture of privacy? And just one last thing, you know, Oana touched on the privacy by design. For me, this is the crux of it all. If we get that privacy by design inbuilt, that it's second nature, say, we're basically going to have a lot of an easier time as DPOs, because they're already integrated into change control. You've already got people thinking about it from an architecture perspective or a design perspective. You know, so I think a lot of what we've got to do as a DPO to have a really effective privacy program is to look at the places where privacy is touched or needs to be thought about, and that's got to be embedded and operationalized as much as possible. And I have to say, 2 years after GDPR went live, the number of organizations where I'm working with where they've still not managed to get that embedded. And that, to me, is the culture issue. That's why we're called privacy culture.
Yeah, it's a really good point, Steve, and quite right around the privacy by design point. It's as the core process, really, that anybody that's working with personal data needs to understand. And it does take a lot of embedding, and as you've already heard from our guests and from Steve today, you know, the skills in this role need to be really wide-ranging so that you do have that reach from the top down, right across the organisation, and then with your specific targeting to particular functions such as HR, for example, and marketing, the people that are working with data on a day-to-day basis, as well as the core requirements for everyone to understand data rights and also data breaches. And just coming back to one of the questions that have come in, and I wanted to pick up on, because we started to touch upon suppliers, and in particular post Schrems 2 and pre-Brexit. The question asked here, you know, should we be paying more attention to our vendors for those reasons? Maria, did you want to pick up on that one as a starting point?
I think we should always pay attention to suppliers, because I think they can be a very big risk before Schrems and after Schrems. After Schrems, definitely, is one of the works to do, not just for Schrems, also for Brexit. Knowing where the data is, knowing where the transfers are going, and that we have the right mechanisms as far as we can, because we are still waiting more guidance on that. But at least that we have done our best due diligence, and we can ensure that processors, sub-processors, because then the chain can be long. And we are in a particular year as well, the year of the pandemic, and there are a lot of people working from home, and some organizations, they may be more hit than others. So there is a lot of risk in suppliers because the chain can be quite long. So it is something that definitely to be quite high in the agenda.
Absolutely, great points there, Maria. And of course, I guess it comes back to the privacy by design and the point about risks and balance that you mentioned earlier, in terms of, you know, what are the volume and what's the risk level of the suppliers that you're in engagement with in your organisation. Oana, did you have any builds on that before we look at another question?
Just a small thing to add, because I also already mentioned about business to business. Usually your business partners will ask you about the third parties you are working, the data processors you are working, and how you are conducting your due diligence. And obviously in post Schrems 2 case, they will ask what is the basis, how you have run your due diligence for transferring data if the case outside the European Union. So it will be a pressure not only internally with you conducting your own risk assessment, but also from the outside business partners.
Great point, thanks, Oana. And possibly connected to that as well, another question's come in around metrics. So which metrics will be used to measure outcomes? Steve, I'll ask you to pick up that to start with, if that's okay.
Yeah, it's a great question, because as we were touching on earlier, the whole question of metrics is we're still fairly, you know, nascent in our thinking in this space, and compared to, say, the security industry, which has, you know, done a lot of work in this space, it does beg the question about what does good look like, and, you know, how then should we measure it, because there are a number of different variables that could affect it. You know, the type of processing that you're doing, the quantity of processing, you know, your geographical location. These are all, you know, have a bearing on what good looks like, or whether or not it should be, you know, how effective it should be. I think the key for me is always about, you know, ask the audience. You know, if you're in doubt, go and talk to your staff, talk, as you've said, Vic, you know, talk to HR, talk to marketing, talk to the salespeople, you know, the warehouse, find out how important it is. I mean, you don't be surprised if your answers are pretty, you know, well, it's not important, because you've got to put it into context. And I think that's the thing. A lot of what we try to deliver, especially in training and awareness, can either be, you know, just basically too compliancy, tick boxy, or there's no context around it. You know, why is this important to me? Yeah, I'm a shop worker. Why do I need to care? I mean, you know, the classic case that we had last week with the German authority finding H&M, the retailer, for this excessive employee monitoring, is a classic example where you would have hoped that the data protection officer or officers were asking these kind of questions. You know, what are you doing with that? Why are you doing that? You know, with that data? And there might be really good reasons why they did that, but it's certainly not not legal, as we found out, and it certainly borders on, you know, some ethical debates as to whether there was a good ethical reason for them to do so, to capture that information. You can almost get there, you know, you can put yourself in a HR position and you're thinking, well, that would be really useful information, because why would we promote them if they've got an underlying problem? But hang on a minute, that's not nice. And I think, you know, what we will see, I hope, actually, and I hope the organisations like the IAPP, which I'm a very keen supporter of, do more in this space. And that's, you know, these are, as Oana and Maria have said, these are many different roles. You can't have one size fits all. A lot of the people that do this role are often lawyers or come from a law background, and that's not necessarily, you know, that's one skill set you need, but there are multiple skill sets. You need to be a project manager, you need to be a fantastic communicator, you know, and sometimes if you look at characters and individuals, they can be the polar opposite of that, and yet they're put in charge of this really important subject, privacy. So it's hard, and I think it's hard for organisations. And I hope the IAPP do more research, more, you know, into what makes up an effective privacy programme. Is not just how well people are responding or how it's built into the culture. It's how well organised the privacy function is, and that's something which I think we've got a long way to go.
Great points there, Steve. Just got a couple of other questions that have come in. I can't believe the time has gone as quickly as it has. So I don't think that this is right for now, but it might be right for the future, and it certainly might be potentially okay for an aspect of this role. But the question is, can we
You've built it up now, Vicky. I'm really intrigued. What is the question?
Can we think of a DPO as a robo-advisor in the future, so an AI-empowered chatbot? Or must it stick to the identity of an individual or a team? Okay, Oana, can I ask you to comment on that one?
Yeah, sure. What I've seen from other companies that are more into the robotic process automation world, they did start to develop some kind of chatbot for answering internal questions to business units, to actually respond to data subject rights. So I guess it might be the case to have this type of AI-empowered chatbots to help the DPO in some areas of the activity, but nevertheless, I don't think we should automate everything, because at least there is this human approach that might stay with the DPO by interacting with some other departments, and it's always good to see a friendly face that it's smiling but not behind the laptop or a nice chatbot.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that makes sense, doesn't it? And certainly the type of communication skills and all of the engagement that everybody needs to do to get the program out there in an organisation and ongoing and embedded certainly takes more than a chatbot. But nevertheless, if it can help automate some of the requirements, I think that could be a good thing. There's just one question, last question here that's come in, I think, before we round off. So in your view, considering SMEs' financial limitations, how can such entities build a robust privacy program, taking into account that for the vast majority of them, data protection and privacy issues are secondary concerns? Maria, in particular, as you actually picked up on that valid point that not every organisation needs a DPO, can we get a response from you on that, please?
Yes. Privacy is going to have the flavour of the organisation, and this is going to be always the case. And that's when we have the roadmap. And I guess it's difficult if an organization is set with principles and a business strategy that is very, very far away from privacy to bring it back. In Europe, it may be more difficult to find this case, maybe in other jurisdictions where there is no GDPR. But I can say that GDPR it has helped to bring these organizations that they are very, very far away a bit inside. And maybe with them, the stick can work much better. But as I said before, the trend of customer trust is something that is going to be hurting, and there have been a number of surveys. There is a very good one by Cisco, and it was interviewing around 3,000 privacy leaders, and it was getting into which was the competitive advantage of trust. And there is this trend, and it's been demonstrated. And there has been also studies that can be found in the IAPP, as Steve mentioned before, back to 2014. And there have been also other vendors. So there is really a trend. So these organizations that they are not that happy with data protection, maybe they're a bit small. I'm thinking that maybe they are organizations that they are starting up and they are more on the technical side of things. And maybe they haven't worked through the whole business strategy. But as I said before, this is a roadmap. We have to start from where we are, and it's a matter of talking to the business, telling them which is the situation, and also telling them what the competition is doing.
Fantastic point there. Fantastic. Yeah, absolutely about customer trust and bringing that back to the business for sure. Steve, I think you've got something that you wanted to add.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to build on what Maria was saying, because I do think there, for me, it must be really hard, being a small business, to put privacy even on the map, let alone on your radar. Because there are so many other priorities to think about. However, I think, I would urge anyone who's advising a small business or working with small business to think of it in sort of two ways. One, just building on what Maria was saying, which is about this trust as a differentiator. That's one thing, because you can say to your customers, and if you've thought it through and you've got the you've understood the purposes of what you're collecting data, and you can articulate that beautifully, and simply, so your customers can really see, actually, you've got a grip at this. That's really important from a psychological point of view, because if I'm going to do business with you, whether you're a third-party supplier way down the food chain or not, I still want to know that you take this subject seriously. Because everyone talks about security. Yeah, we do security. Yeah, of course, right. So a little bit of encryption and everyone thinks you're safe, right? And I think the other thing is, so trust as a differentiator, I'd say, is one thing. And I think the other thing is, I think we're going to find that the market will drive a lots of these seals or these certifications. And it might be, sector specific, like the telecoms industry, for example, where you won't do business if you haven't got your little seal or your tick around privacy. And I think we'll see that much more, a bit like, and I've mentioned this many times before, the SSL certificate, which then created the little padlock in the browsers of yesteryear. And before then, we were all doing business in open text, and then all of a sudden we're like, hang on a minute, this is a bit scary. So I think we're going to see, industry taking the initiative there, driven by customers' expectation. And let's not diminish the fact that, only last week, or was it the week before, Apple have produced a fantastic 2-minute video, and it's all about privacy. And so we're going to be led, I think, by this. All the big techs are now seeing this as a differentiator. Microsoft cottoned on to this ages ago, and Zuckerberg will get there eventually. But the big guys are heading in that direction, and therefore, from a supply chain, we're going to have to pull our socks up. So I think it's not a case of if, it is a case of when. But I do respect the fact that it's hard when you've got so many other priorities as an SME to put privacy at the front. I just try and think about it as a differentiator. It's you know, it make you stand out from the crowd. Fantastic
point, Steve. So I think we're pretty much running out of time. I can't believe it, as ever. We've had a fabulous conversation. I think, can we just find out from our guests and from Steve if there's just one thing, because we talked about so many things, if people are struggling to focus on first, what would that be? Oana, would you like to go first?
I always like to speak about awareness and training. So I have seen that it helps a lot on building a culture and having people engage if you not only train them and deliver tailored trainings for each department, but also engage them through regular communications like weekly emails or monthly newsletters, or just some messages one-to-one saying, you know, this is what happened in Germany. Look what happened with that company. What a huge fine they got because look here. So awareness and training is very important.
Excellent point. Yeah, and absolutely making it contextual and really relevant and up to date is so important as well. Definitely. Maria, can I come to you now?
Oana, you have made very good points. I'm going to be building on your ones actually. Is engagement and having this story, underlying story going on. And it's something that you were saying, Oana, is having this story that we are developing each and every time and aligned to the organization, so we can help in embedding this privacy each time a bit more. I'm thinking of little steps into this privacy culture.
Fantastic point there as well. And then finally to you, Steve.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, the ladies have just absolutely nailed it. And, you know, empowerment was what I always think about, you know, training, awareness, you know, having the story, and the engagement is so important. So the only thing I could think of that I would really push if I was, say, starting for whatever size organization and whatever they're doing with the data is ownership. So what I mean by that is just sitting down with the data owners, because in my experience, they don't even know they're data owners, and just explaining to them what their responsibilities are, just as a fellow human being, let alone as, you know, as a custodian of people's data. And sometimes those small little conversations can make a heck of a difference. It certainly helped me at John Lewis when I sat down with the individual board members and said to them, here are your responsibilities, what are you going to do about it? And that changed everything for me and made the whole privacy program much easier. It was still hard, but easier. But, you know, really good points from our guests. So yeah, that's all. Can I just do a sneaky little plug for next week, Vic? So as you know, we always like to have great guests and great topics. So next week is no different. We are tackling the wonderful topic of Brexit. Now, I was going to bring in Dominic Cummings, but I'm afraid he's not available. So instead, we've got two fantastic guests coming from an industry perspective and from a legal perspective. And so we can really unpick what that means for us, and importantly, what can we do about Brexit, because it's not looking good. so tune in for next Friday at 2 o'clock again. Back to you, Rick.
Excellent. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you so much for your insights and for your time, Oana and Maria. And thank you for joining us today. And we'll see you at the same time next week to talk about Brexit.
Thank you very much.